Good morning, everyone. Thank you for responding. And let's give a hand for Kate, because she almost had the whole show with all of our sponsors. And we really appreciate all of our sponsors' support. Not only does it help to put this event together, but it also helps to fund the journalism that we produce every day in the Portland Press Herald and on our website. So, Frank, how's my sound? Because it feels echoey and weird to me. Am I okay? No, well, how do I sound to all of you? Great? Yeah. Good? Okay, thank you. So, welcome to Melissa Smith. Thank you so much for taking time to be here on Like a Boss this morning. I'm running a $1 billion public company with global reach, headquartered here in Maine. I'm really appreciative that you took the time to be with us.
Oh, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
So we start Like a Boss by finding out all about you. So let's go back to your roots, about where you grew up.
Okay. So I grew up in Maine. I grew up about 4 hours north of here in a little town called Wynn. There's about 400 people in my hometown. So just like, if you picture it, there's no stoplights. We did have an ice cream store. There was a post office, and that was about it. And I grew up in a working potato farm.
So I understand that you were both the captain of the math team and also a cheerleader, which I think kind of sums up your versatility, right? As a CEO, but also, someone with brilliance in the financial space.
Yeah, I actually think that growing up in a small town, one of the things that the disadvantage is you don't get a lot of exposure. The advantage of not having a lot of exposure is that everybody has to participate. And so you don't, as a woman growing up there, as a girl growing up there, you didn't have to pick a lane. And so this idea that I could be a cheerleader or I could play soccer and I could be on the math team was something that was normal. And so, I think it was only later in life that I realized that people tend to gravitate to one or another. And I kind of like the idea that you can do many different things. You don't have to be defined by one thing.
Right. So Wynn, Maine took you then to UMaine Orono, and talk about how you got there.
Yeah. So go Black Bears.
Do we have any Black Bears? We do. Yes.
So I'm a legacy. So I have this history at the University of Maine. My mother worked there. She was the director of human resources, and so as long as I could remember, trailing her going onto campus. And my mom is one of those brilliant people who graduated from high school early and graduated college when she was 19. She's got a master's in mathematics, and so she's not to be discounted.
Yeah.
And when she actually went to college, my grandmother, who was a teacher at the time, decided that she wanted to go back and get more education, and so they actually went to college together at the same point in time. I've got this great article that was produced that shows them sitting on the front steps of the library together.
Yeah.
My mom at the time was, I think, 17 or 18, and my grandmother, she was 40 when she had my mom, and so she was, in her 60s at that point in time, deciding to go back to college. And so
Wow.
UMaine was part of my heritage, and when I got to the point in time for me to go to school, it was, it was pretty clear that was where I was going to go.
So you're really third generation there, right?
I am.
That's pretty. That's pretty
Yes.
an amazing story, especially for your grandmother to have gone back, which is so great. So at home, I also understand that it was equal participation from your mother and your stepfather. Talk about what that was like.
Yeah. So my mom worked, and and they commuted. They had moved back up to where my mother grew up to help take care of my grandparents because my grandparents were aging, and so they commuted about an hour each way back and forth to work. And so when they got home at night, each of them did as much, as one another. And so I had this model. My stepfather was a lovely man. He and my mom had been married since I was 5, and so I can't remember a time in my life when he wasn't in my life. And he was so great about taking care of her, but he was also incredibly humble about, I'm going to do whatever it needs to be done, to take care of the house. And so that was my model growing up. And again, I didn't know anything different. That was, he made sure that he was equal partners with her.
Yeah, that's a great example to set. And it seems like you've modeled that in your relationship today, right?
Yeah, and my husband's here somewhere.
Yep, there he
is. Oh, way back there. Yes. Yeah, I would say our life works because we're partners, and I think that we are each supporting of one another, and it's important to each of us to have full lives, and so there are periods of time where he's leaning in more, and there are periods of time I'm leaning in more, and we make it work.
Yeah, you guys should do a podcast about that, because I think there are a lot of married couples that would like to listen to that. I know I put it on for my husband and be like, the dishwasher doesn't unload itself. All right, so let's talk about your transition into working. So what was your first job?
Well, first job, I said the rite of passage when you grow up on a farm is to drive farm equipment. And so as soon as I could see over a steering wheel, I drove the hay truck.
Yeah.
I said that's actually, it's a great example, because if you spilled the hay off the back, it didn't matter that you were less than 100 pounds, you get out and you loaded it back up. And so, we were working, from as long as I could remember around the farm. We had to sell potatoes. We had to, just keep up all the farm work. We had horses, and so you had to work on that. And so it was a while before my first paid job, actually, I think, was at the University of Maine, filing, which is a good thing to learn early in your life, what you don't want to do later in your life.
Right. Is that both farm work and filing,
yes,
or just more filing?
Yeah, I mean, the farm work part, I love being outside, but I watched my, my uncle actually was the one who ran the family farm. He never had downtime. You don't ever stop.
Right.
And so the idea of doing something different, and also something a little bit brainier. I think that it has become much more, about the science. But at that point in time, it was a lot of just about the physical piece of it.
Right. So then let's talk about your time at UMaine. So what did you study?
I studied business.
Okay.
So I had, gosh, you're going way back there. I had a concentration in accounting.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what was interesting to me, I knew when I went into school that I wanted to study business, and that was really watching my mom. I didn't know all the things that you could do, but I liked the world that she lived in, kind of generically speaking.
Yeah.
And I went into the school, and I was really lucky enough to have a professor. One of my first years, I don't remember if it was my freshman or my sophomore year, I had taken an accounting class, and he would write me notes. And his name's Marshall Geiger, and he would write me little notes that say, what's your major going to be? What do you think you're going to do? And that started a series of conversations which led me into public accounting, which was something I knew nothing about. I kept thinking, accounting, my God, that sounds so boring, know? And he was the one who said, listen, there are different things you can do in that field. And one of them, the thing about public accounting that was really perfect for me is that you go to different locations, you work with different people. A lot of it is about the people part of it. You had to understand the technical part, but you're constantly working with clients in a different environment. Yeah. And I liked that. And I don't think I would have ever found that path if not for him and his constant encouragement.
So he was like your personal guidance counselor, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think
which is great.
I was very lucky that I had him that took the time to actually make a difference. And I think it's what a great opportunity for anyone who has that impact with kids.
Right.
The idea that you can form where they're going to go in life. I think you forget sometimes how impactful little things can be.
Yeah. Did he ever write you could be the CEO of $1 billion global company?
No.
Yeah. So what was your first job then out of college?
So I went to work for Ernst & Young out of college, and I worked here in Portland. And I picked Ernst & Young because it just felt right. It was from a cultural perspective. I'd interviewed with a bunch of different firms. At that point in time, Portland felt like a big move. And so I decided to go to Portland as opposed to Boston. And I wanted to. And my siblings had all fled. And I thought it was important to have somebody in the family close to my parents, to help with, as they grew older as well. And it was another great move. when I think about the people that I worked with, some of my best friends come from that period of my life, because you're all coming to college, you come into a class together, you travel together. My first year out, I traveled 26 weeks out of the year.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So you really get to know the people that you're working with.
Yeah,
and at the same time, you're almost instantly thrown into managing others. You do that really pretty quickly, and you learn, because you're managing to a budget, that you actually have to treat everybody differently in order to get what you want at the end. That you have to be very adaptable.
Did they give you management training, or
No.
it was on the job?
No, yeah,
it was
no,
on,
it was
the,
on the
job.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, how did you get to WEX?
I was at an event, and I met somebody who worked at WEX, and he called me the next day and said, "Would you be interested in getting in leaving?" And I said no, and he said, "Would you be at least willing to come in and talk to me?" And I came in and I talked to him, and I met with the person who was the CEO at the time, Paul Walsh, who actually I just saw the other day, and I don't think he knew it at the time, but he had gotten woozy in the interview, so he didn't feel well and had to leave the room. And when I turned down the job, he took it personally, and then he went on a little bit of a mission to hire me. And again, I was talking to him the other day. He doesn't remember any of this, but he became pretty aggressive about it. And I think that the things that stood out to me, he said, WEX is the type of place that an individual can make a difference. It's the type of place that the growth is going to give future opportunities, and your work will be rewarded. And there a bunch of things that connected with me, because I remember thinking at the time, if I stayed in public accounting, I would do largely the same things for the rest of my career. And the idea of going and working in a business was appealing, and the idea that you felt a little bit more tangible around the results of what you're going to be doing.
Right.
And he convinced me, and I was talking to him recently, and he said, so 20 years ago, so I started WEX 20 years ago, and he was the CEO. We had $64 million worth of revenue at that point in time.
Wow.
And based solely here in Portland, Maine, and it's been quite the journey since.
So your first job there, you were a senior financial analyst. So
yep.
How many jobs did you have before you got to president and CEO?
8 or 9. It was kind of, my job would change every couple of years.
Yeah.
And for me, the title didn't really mean anything, frankly. It was do whatever you needed to be done at any given point in time. And so it was senior financial analyst, and then I ran the FP&A group, and then I became the controller, and then I became the CFO, and then so it kind of accelerated from that point in time. I became the CFO in 2001, I think. So it's been a while since then, and at that point in time, we were owned by a Fortune 50 conglomerate.
Right.
Which was also interesting as a finance person at that point in time, because they were mostly run by finance people that were gifted at what they did, and so I got a chance to learn from a lot of them as my career progressed.
Yeah. So let's transition and talk a little bit about, well, not a little bit, a lot about WEX specifically. So you have 2,700 employees, 11 countries.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And I think a lot of your success has been your expansion into new lines of business. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So one of the great things about our business has been the core of what we do, which is a fleet card. So if you're going to go out, if you're a business and you want to make sure that people are not buying things that they shouldn't, we will give you a card, and you can lock down that card to purchase solely just fuel. And we give a huge amount of analysis around that, so it's become much more sophisticated over the years. And the piece of that business is that we earn revenue as people fuel, and so we earn a percentage of revenue, which means that part of the business is exposed to fuel prices.
Right.
And that's the core of what we do. And as we've expanded it outside the United States, the buffer that exposure. And so part of when we started looking at diversifying the business, we did it for a couple of reasons. We stood back and said, at the core, what are we good at? And what we realized that what we were good at is really simplifying really complex payment environments. And so it was taking away some of the complexity you had there. And the added benefit is as we started to enter these new businesses, that we started to create more buffer around something that was uncontrollable for us, was that exposure we had. And so that was important to us strategically as well. And so we bought a healthcare business. It's been 3 years now. And so what that does is if you have, and I know you do.
Yes, I do.
An HSA card or
Yeah.
an FSA card, it's the technology that powers the ability to make sure that that gets locked down just for legitimate transactions.
Yeah, I told Melissa I went to make a health payment on my HSA account, and down the bottom it said powered by WEX Healthcare, and I'm like, oh, that's what they do.
I know, there's like the constant, like, it used to be we're a trucking company. That was
Yeah.
like for the forever the thing, and now there's a little bit more ambiguous of what they do, but because largely what we do is behind the scenes. So that the travel business we have is probably the most relatable for people, because if you were to go online and book a hotel room in Expedia or Priceline or you name it, any of the global online travel agencies, you would use your consumer card, but we pay all the hotels in the world on behalf of those online travel agencies.
Right.
And so most global part of what we do, all very much behind the scenes. And they pick us because we make transactions occur in a very seamless manner. And they want it to be they want it to happen. They want a reconciliation to happen into their general ledger account in a way that causes no rework for them. And so it's a very probably unglamorous but important part of their business model. And because we started doing business with Priceline, when Priceline was barely making it.
Pre-William Shatner.
Yeah. Well, so it was around the same time, actually, I think.
Did you meet him?
No. We do business typically in that case with their CFO, so I'd meet their CFOs.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but not their stars. No.
Well, that's cool too. Okay, so you had big news this week. You were certified as a great place to work. I guess the first year in. Talk a little bit about that, but I want to just rattle off some stats. That 84% of your employees say management is honest and ethical in your business practices. 83% say they can take time off from work when they think it's necessary, and 80% say management is competent in running the business. There's only one other company in Maine that's reached that certification level, and I think that's Martin's Point, if I'm correct, but tell me what I got wrong and how awesome this is.
So, I won't correct you in the main piece because I'm sure you've got great facts there, but on the why. So one of the things that we were thinking about, I'm a little type A, right? So when we came to cultural pieces, I wanted to have a goal because I know that we have a great culture, but I wanted to have something that was more of a proof point that we're doing the right things for employees, because we've made a whole series of investments, and I wanted to get a better sense of, is it really hitting home? And we've been doing surveys for years, but we're benchmarking against ourselves.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of benchmarking ourselves against the best of the best. And so we chose Great Places to Work for a whole bunch of reasons. But if you look at the people who are on their 100 best, they're incredibly respected companies. And what they said to us is, this is a journey. It will take you a few years. People don't get certification in the first year. And so that's what we went into it believing. And so when we found out that we actually had made the list, it's great. I mean, it's great in so many ways. But what I liked, 84% of our employees actually filled out a survey, which means our degree of error was 1%, which is phenomenal in itself. So she was the woman who did this came running in saying, that's amazing, because they normally get 60-ish% participation. So it was clear that our employees cared.
Right.
And then the results as they came through are really strong. And so, we think of this still as a journey, because while we made the list of best places to work, we want to be in that top 100 category.
Yeah.
And so, it's like us, and we're like, that's great, but now we're going to move into the next piece. And it's a really good tool, because you get a sense of what people like about the company and places that we need to work. And yeah, so we actually had this big celebration. So we were out in Thompson's Point. We had our all-company meeting there, which we do a couple of times a year. We were under a tent, and we had the people from the circus school come in. And so they had people on stilts, and they were people doing a bunch of different I don't know.
Contortions.
Yes. Yeah, as we announced it to the employee base this week, so it was great.
Well, it's no surprise that you got that accreditation because your benefits are ridiculous, like off the charts. And I have a huge list of them, including the 6-week paid parental leave for both moms and dads, that you pay for adoptions, that you have WEX branded bicycles for people to use back and forth in between your locations. You get 2 days off for community service. So talk about how all those come together and how that works in terms of retention and recruitment.
Yeah. I think that it's a little simple in a way. Let's say that there's 2 guiding pieces for me. The first one is that I want people to be able to live their whole life.
Yeah.
I lived my whole life, and which doesn't mean that I don't expect a lot out of the people that work there. I do. But I think that we live in a world of flexibilities more and more important. So the idea of doing something like parental leave allows both men and women to take time off when they have a family, and I just think that's important. So at the end of the day, when they come back to work, they can come back to work feeling better about the whole experience. Pay time off in many ways for us, the volunteer days. Mm-hmm. It was something that used to happen organically here when we were just based in South Portland. But as the business has grown, it was important to me to make sure that connection to the communities that actually gets memorialized. And so I'd say that in a way it's institutionalizing a practice that we would have had, but making sure that people around the world know that that's acceptable too, that we not only do we think it's okay, but we really want our leaders in particular, but our employees also to be volunteering and being part of the communities that we live and work in. And so the 2 days is really just a kind of a show of the fact that it's something we would have done historically. And when we had the United Way of Day of Caring here, we had over 100 people in Maine that volunteered, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it sounds like your employee engagement is just at the highest level, which is amazing because it leads to greater productivity and satisfaction. So it's all connected.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing is people think of this as a softer thing that you do, and while that's true, there's actually a smart business piece to that.
Right.
And like the companies that make the great places to work have, by degree, 5 times the amount of success of compare it to just an average population, and so it actually does matter.
It pays off. Yeah. You also were testing a sabbatical program.
Yes.
So how's that going to work?
Yeah, so this is our first year that we've done it. So employees who have worked at WEX for more than 6 years are eligible. We allowed people to apply, and we've got a dozen-ish people that are our test case. So they take 20 consecutive days off, so essentially a month. They get to have a month off. And we decided not to put any restrictions on what they did. And it's amazing how impactful that has been. People who are part of this test program are so excited. Mm-hmm. And we made sure that it was distributed so that you've got all different levels in the organization that are participating, different geographies that are participating. And they actually have informally got this little group together where they're connecting on what their plans are, which I think is kind of fun.
Yeah, that's so can you go fishing for a month or but you could.
Yeah,
okay.
you could. Yeah, some of them are actually one of the women I was talking to is doing her own version of Eat, Pray, Love, and she's kind of she's loves to cook, and so she's going to go over into Europe and take some cooking classes, and she's going into other parts of the world to do, kind of going through that list of what she's always wanted to do.
Wow.
It's great.
That's great to have the time to do that. What a luxury and a gift. So speaking of kind of connecting all the offices, so you have people across 11 different countries. Can you talk about, from a communications and a culture perspective, how do you keep people connected? What's the thread that connects everyone? And do people in Australia go, they get everything in Portland?
Sometimes, yes. Yeah, that's actually hard. It's a lot harder to keep people in sync when you're working on different geographies, and now with different languages. We introduced some of the countries we're in Europe and in Brazil, That just makes it more difficult. And I would say, like this week is a great example. We had the top 160 leaders, so directors and VPs across the world came to Maine, yay. And,
Yeah, thank you.
And they were so excited because they got to go out. We took them out to Great Diamond Island. We had lobster. And how formative is that when you're trying to figure out how to crack something?
Right.
They were really hard shell this year, so people were like, they were getting pretty creative. They were out under the tent with their feet trying to jump on them. And so, we had a speaker come in and we do working group sessions and we talk about, as a company, these are the things we want to do strategically. Talk to me about how we can message it better, or are there places of our strategy you don't understand, and we need to make sure that we can connect that, because that group of people connects to the rest of the company, and so if we can keep them aligned and solid, that really trickles down. And so that's the first thing. We do that every year to 18 months. We get that group of people together in person, which matters, and because a lot of the people, we're growing so fast, you've got a whole group of people who've never met others. And so we do that. When we do any of our meetings, it's videoed and webcast, and so people around the world have a chance to participate. And I think we're getting smarter about making sure that other people feel like they're part of the celebration. It's never quite the same as if you're here, because they don't have circus people.
Right, right.
But I think that the technology helps a lot with the tools, video conferencing, making sure that you're seeing people, so it's not just hearing their voice matters a lot. And so we work pretty hard on that.
So I also know you love to get feedback, and one of your employees told me that you went around and you asked people, so what don't you like about WEX? So what did you hear?
That was you.
Not to call them out. So what did you hear, and how do you respond to it?
I think it's actually really important to hear what people have to say. So when I give a performance review at the end of the review, I'll say, okay, talk to me about what I can do differently. And you have to grow a little thick skin. You're like, oh, this is going to hurt. But I think that's important. And the same thing when I do small group meetings, people know that they can say what they think.
Yeah.
And again, sometimes I don't like it. You're in the moment of, having someone do it's the finger thing I don't like. Let me tell you, But at the end of the day, you start to look for themes, and I think that's really the important thing. If I hear one or two things, that's sometimes tangents. When you start to hear themes, that's when I pay a lot more attention to it. And the themes are different, and that's when I go into a region, I go into an office, I do three things. I do a presentation to the whole group. I get the leader of the unit together, and I talk to them as a group. And then I'll talk to the leader individually. And I'd say for me that the most impactful piece is when I get that leadership team together in a kind of smaller group, and you ask direct questions.
Yeah.
And for me, some of the direct questions are, how does your experience relate to your experience with the rest of WEX? Because we're very decentralized. We have 37 offices, and so what is your experience? And people, once you get the first one who's candid, then it's amazing. It's just like, an hour of like, floodgate. Let me tell you all the things that I think, and people are pretty good about doing both and saying, I love this part and I wish this piece would change.
Another one of your employees said to me, work-life balance is real at WEX. So is it real for you?
Yeah, that's the stumper, right?
Yes, dear.
Yes, dear. I think yes. I think actually, I'd answer this in a couple ways. I think when I think about balance, I think of it over periods of time.
Yeah.
So there's certainly, I travel a third of the time. So there are periods of time when I'm just not physically here. And so I want to make sure that you don't look back on life and have regrets about how you spend your time. And so I think I do a pretty good job overall of balancing it, but at any given point in time, it may not be perfect. And I try to make it as visible as I can when I'm doing things. As an example, I'm not running a lot right now. I'd love to run, but at this point in my life, I haven't figured out how to fit that in as much as I'd like. But when I can, say once a month, I will try to run at lunch so people can see it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important that they understand that that's part of my life. And most of the time that's not going to work. I'm going to go early in the morning.
Right.
And so I think I have a great set of friends. I work with people that I really like. I'm intellectually stimulated. I have a tremendous husband and partner. I have children. So overall, when I think about balance, I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah. That's a tough one. You've got a lot. You've got a lot on your plate with 37 offices. Do you make it to each office ever?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good answer. Let's talk about your leadership team, right? So you come in as president and CEO. Some of them were your peers.
Mm-hmm.
How do you build that team?
Yeah. So it's a great mix. One of the things I feel strongly about is you hire people that are different, and so I look for that concept of diversity of thought, and I love people who push me, and so I tend to hire people that are. It's important to me that they're highly confident in what they do, but also that you like them. There's a likability factor that I look for when I'm interviewing, and I think that's important in their culture that's relationship oriented. That these are people that they can be really good at what they do without huge egos, and so if you look at my staff now, it's about a third that have been promoted within WEX, about a third that came through acquisition, and about a third that I've hired from the outside. And it's a really great mix of the people that came in from the outside. I've hired people intentionally that have global experience.
Yeah.
And so that helps with some things that if you've grown up within WEX, you wouldn't have experienced before. You're kind of learning as you go. And the people that came through the acquisitions help keep that connection to the employees of the acquired company. And they also have really good experience around thinking about things from an entrepreneurial perspective, because these are smaller companies than WEX, and so they've had to grow a business without a lot. And so I think they help just with that speed factor as well.
So you've got your team, and a big part of your success has been expansion. So how does innovation happen? How do you prioritize what you're going to, where you're going to take the company? And is a lot of it driven by you and your team?
I think actually innovation is one of those things that are much more effective if it's grassroots. And so the way that I've migrated over time, my thinking is that there are pieces of things that we have a group of people that sit at a corporate level that's what they focus on, and those are kind of the big long-term things. So something like blockchain, we have people that were working on that, or connected cars, or think kind of way out into the future, and because the people that sit in a line of business are pretty focused on the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And so so there's an expectation if you're sitting in the line of business that you're bringing something to the market that's relevant to the future, but I'd say a couple year relevant. And the people that sit at the corporate level think about things that are longer term in nature. But the innovation part happens everywhere, and it pops up, and I think some of that's just highlighting some of the goodness that happens. And it could be something as simple as we have one group in Fargo that are amazing marketers, and so they will, as we do a product rollout, which could be incredibly boring, and they do product rollouts all the time, but the person who does the rollout narrative gets videotaped, so think YouTube. And you might be dressed up like a Christmas tree, and you might be dressed up like in a smoking jacket. And so their customers are so excited about getting the product release update because of something that's very simple. But he packages it in a way that's creative and innovative. And then we have innovation that happens with technology, where we're getting patents on some of the mobile technology that we're rolling out into the marketplace. And that's kind of more on the technology end of innovation. And we think a lot about, on that side of it, how do we go faster?
Right.
So it's a huge amount of focus as we get bigger. Is how do we make sure that we can go even faster as opposed to slower because we're bigger?
I recently read in the Portland Press Herald that that WEX is moving downtown or expanding to downtown. So what's behind that?
Yes, and so I'd say it's not done yet, as reported by the Portland Press Herald. But it is. We're looking at the option and hopeful about this idea that we would move the piece that we would move downtown would be the tech and product, the innovation hub, and then the corporate headquarters. And so we would keep some of the a large majority of the offices that we have in South Portland as well. And I love the idea of being in that downtown area for the energy. I think there's a connection to the part of the business that we're talking about moving there.
Right. Would that be also a recruiting
Yes.
technique, right, to bring people to your downtown headquarters? And
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's recruiting is also for our customers. And I
Right.
think you're bringing in people that they get that sense of Portland
yeah.
by being in that downtown area. They can walk from the hotel right into the office, and that's going to be great.
Yeah, yeah. And I also read in the Portland Press Herald that you are expanding and hiring up to 100 new positions. So what job classifications will those be?
So it's a little all over the place. The biggest two places are technology roles and finance roles this year that we're hiring. We're also hiring in the operations center on a pretty regular basis. But the reason why with technology, we're consolidating some of the technology that we've done in other areas of our offices, and so we've been moving that. Same thing with the finance functions with some of the acquisitions we're doing, that we're creating some concentration here.
So how are you doing recruiting talent to Maine? Is being in Maine an advantage, a disadvantage? I also know you've done a lot of recruiting on campuses.
Yeah, I think that being in Maine is both. And so we've done a lot of work, and we'll continue with a lot of people in this room to try to create a better environment to recruit locally. And that's important to us for our presence here in Maine, and particularly on the tech talent side. That's something that we think a lot about. And so part of why we've been working on the internship program is we think of that as a feeder. And so we were really active in the marketplace this year, drumming up applicants, and we had 1,700 applicants for 32 internship roles. So when you think about that, it's pretty incredible. And so the interns are phenomenal, with the idea that we want to make sure we retain a large amount of them, and we'd like to expand that. And so that's one way that we're dealing with recruiting here. I think that also, though, I don't think we give ourselves enough credit. When I go into the marketplace and I do some of the executive recruiting, Maine has a connection with people that sometimes I think if you live here, you downplay, because often people have gone to summer camp here, they have a second home here, or they're living in a city, and we do really well with people when they've got young children living in a city. They want a different experience for their children growing up. And so our CTO, we just hired a CTO. He's originally from Scotland. He's been living in California for 20 years. So I say, yay, it's my first California success story. I used to say I could recruit from anywhere but California.
Yeah.
And he moved here with his family, and they love it. I mean, they think it's a great place. And literally, they moved into their house the day before we got like 2 feet of snow. And so I was texting him that morning. I said, do you have a shovel?
Yeah.
Do you know how to drive in snow?
Right.
And do you have someone to plow you out? Do you need help? And it was like, this is kind of a little adventure for us. So he thinks it's great. And so, I have talked to him on certain days where he's like, I've never seen cold like this before. But he's hooked, and I've said I can kind of across the group of people. And one of the themes I hear when I relocate people here are how their children feel when they go into the school systems here. There's this sense of relief over anxiety, and that they didn't know that was happening until they actually moved the kids here. And so it actually has a tremendous amount to offer as well.
Yeah, that's a tremendous point about the kids that I haven't heard before. So yeah, that's really impactful to get folks here. So only 5% of CEOs of public companies are women. So you are in a very small group of people. What's your reaction to that, and how does that change?
Well, it is. I guess it's reality. I think it's been my reality for so long that I don't think about it that much. So when we first went public, I was 35, and so I was the CFO, and it's about the same statistic for female CFOs as well. And I remember I'd walk into a room, and you could see the reaction. Someone's about to make a $30 million decision, and they're like, well, that's not what I expected.
Yeah.
But I've learned over time that you stand out, right? And there's a good to that, and there's a bad to that, right? And so if you can kind of get the narrative right in your head of that's a positive, that they're going to remember me, and that it gives you an opportunity to stand out. And I think at the end of the day, largely people, they just care that you're competent. Mm-hmm. So it's this kind of, if you can get beyond the sense of, I'm different, and kind of think of it as that's okay. At the end of the day, all they care about is, am I performing? I think that's important. But I'd love to see more women do this. And there's lots and lots of talented people out there, and I think it's unfortunate that there just aren't more that are in these roles.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to get to 6% by next year. So, although your goal is probably much higher than that, because I have a sense that you hit in every goal that you set. But let me ask you this question. So you seem fearless, right? You were lowered down onto the stage at the State Theater at a company meeting from a simulated helicopter. You easily rappelled down the side of one city center. You seem to not be afraid of anything. What are you afraid of?
But Lisa didn't say she actually rappelled down.
I know,
well.
But I grew up at the top of the building before I went down.
You didn't look nervous.
Well, I was faking it.
Oh, that's my point.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have this big belief that that everyone's afraid, right? That everyone is. It's leaning into your fears. So if you can actually do something that makes you uncomfortable, it typically is some of the best things you do in your life.
Yeah.
And I can think of example after example in my personal life, but also I relate that to WEX too. Right? There's, when we take risks and we do something, we bought a $1.5 billion company last year, and that was a big bet for us. And at the same time, if you unite people behind something, mm-hmm. it's remarkable what they can do, and I think that's true in an individual level. If you get yourself to kind of just do it, it's amazing how you will feel and how much you can accomplish, and it doesn't mean you're not scared.
Right. Well, just the example when we rappelled off the building, it's all about the first step, right?
Yeah, very much so. Although I don't know that I love any of the steps down.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. When I was rappelling down, so someone in my office called, and when we do our all company meetings, I feel like a piece of that is to entertain, mm-hmm. and so they called and said, hey, do you mind rappelling down State Theater? I'm like, okay, I'll do that. Well, I got there. What I didn't expect is there were two men holding me. There's a harness. It wasn't like what we do where there's really all the equipment, right? It's two men hauling me up and hauling me down. So you're really getting, so I had to get to know them a little bit better. I wanted them to know me as a person as they were hauling me up.
Yes. We're about to take questions, and we have a microphone in the center of the room, so as well as over there. So if you want to ask questions, head to those microphones while I ask Melissa to describe your Maine. So what are your favorite things in Maine?
So I grew up in northern Maine, so I think of Maine as full of trees and water, and so my favorite places are Katahdin, Acadia. I think Acadia is so remarkable. It's the fact that you could be on a mountain and you can see it's all the ocean. It's just a beautiful place. I like some of the unexpected places in Maine too. I like going off into some of the islands because you get into those little, very chill mm-hmm. areas. Sugarloaf to me is another part that I love it. And I think I've converted my husband. I think he's a Sugarloafer now. But you park your car, and you get this sense of community that I think is important.
Yeah. Chandra has our first question.
Hello.
Let's go.
I wonder if you find time to read, what kind of things do you read? Are they leadership books or strong woman books, or all of the books about running that I read?
Great question.
Yeah. So I love to read, and a little bit of each. I would say more recently, so on a personal level, I love reading nonfiction. And, well, actually, I love reading both. There's a little bit of each. So Hillbilly Effigy is my most recent book, and it took me a lot longer to read than it used to in the past. I'd say most recently, because we have 3 little kids, I read a lot about parenting, and I listen on tape more to the leadership type of books, because I find that hard to actually make your way all the way through it. So I'd rather listen to it as you go back and forth. It's a little bit of everything, and I think the idea of just kind of challenging your brain and the thing I like about, well, both fiction and nonfiction. I like the narrative you get from listening to people's stories of how they've lived in life, but also when you get into something that gives you a totally different perspective and reminds you how good you've got it. I think that's something that always hits home a little bit, because I think you can constantly reinforce the idea that your life's pretty good.
Hi, my name is Chanel Lewis. I work with Educate Maine and a bunch of other things in the community. I have a question about, so being a young female African-American professional in Maine, what do you say to someone who wants to work here and wants to grow here? Mm-hmm. So at times it can feel very limiting. How do I grow here?
How do you grow in Maine?
Yeah, and stay here.
No, I think Maine actually rates highly for women in business, and I feel like it's part of one of the positive things about the community here is that it's much more accepting than in other places. I think that for me in the career part, it's focusing on what you enjoy. Like really, at the end of the day, what do you enjoy, and connecting that to your work world. So if there are pieces of what you want to do, if you kind of flash forward your career, just finding the network into that. Because at the end of the day, a lot of again, I'll relate it to my career, has been as much about people as anything else. And so it's kind of bridging that path with connections with people that can help make sure you know about the next role, or makes it clear that they understand you well enough too, that do you have what it takes. And I think the other thing is when you are in an opportunity, I think you can't undervalue working hard, and the idea of, someone told me once, work a level ahead. And I think that's important, that if you make your boss's job easy, that actually you become almost indispensable. They're going to lift you because they can't live without you. And I think there's a line of making sure you don't step too far, but I think you can do a lot in your environment to make life easier for those around you, and I think that works as well.
Thank you.
Great questions. What else? Do we have any additional questions? Oh, here we go.
I have a market question. Since the start of the year, the stock market's been on a tear. And yesterday, the U.S. House, for people who are watching stuff outside of the Comey hearings, voted to repeal the Dodd-Frank Act. As a business, do you think that this is sustainable, or do you see it's a bubble, or how are you protecting your business in the light of this financial news?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There's a fairly prevalent view around, we've been on quite a tear for a long time, and so that would typically result in I don't know that you'd say a burst of the bubble, but at least in deceleration of what's happening in the stock market. For us at WEX, we're a publicly traded company. Our stock is going to move, and what I would say to the people that work there is that if you focus on the results and doing the right thing every day, that the stock price itself resolves itself over time, and that may mean that in a period of time where the market's contracting, that the multiple gets contracted, and then other periods of time that's going to open back up. I don't control that, but you affect the things you can control and focus on that, because you could drive yourself crazy as a public company looking at your stock price every day. And I do think over time it is fair, but it's over time. It's not any given day. And our stock in particular tends to react pretty strongly, positively and negatively. And so if I spend all my time thinking about any given day, I'd do nothing else but navel glaze.
Good morning. I'm Joan Fortin from Bernstein Scher, and I really applaud you for the employee engagement and the culture that you developed at WEX.
Thank you. Thank you.
Part of my job is to focus on attraction, retention, and development of our talent, and that is hugely important to our future success. And I'm a big believer in mentoring. I've had important mentors in my life, and I try to make sure the folks at my firm have mentors. Could you talk about mentoring at WEX? I assume you've had some important mentors, and do you have a mentoring program to foster up-and-coming leaders? Thank you.
Yes. And mentorship is important. So we do a couple of things on the development side. Any of our VPs and directors go through a program called an Integrated Development Leadership Program, and as part of that, they get an external coach for a year, which I like because it gives you somebody who's vested just in you, and they don't care about the politics of anything going on in the business. And so we've implemented that. It's been a couple of years that we've gone through that. And then with the management team, the VPs and directors are their coaches. And so they take what they've learned, and we're moving that into the management training. And then in addition to that, we have a formalized mentorship program. And all of those things are ways of trying to create connectedness. And I think for us, but in particular, the Integrated Leadership Development Program, we bring people together across the world to go into these group meetings, and there's typically less than 20-ish people that goes through each program at a time, and they walk away united. It's kind of amazing how they have their own little clique that they get to know each other on a much better level, and I think that's important for us because of the kind of the geographic spread that we have. But yeah, I think in many ways learning from one another is really important. I think for me, it hasn't been any one person. It's been little bits and pieces of what you like about what people do, and also what you don't like, which I think is equally important. Like, I don't ever want to do that, But I think that I work with some great people, and you talked about the congratulations on the great places to work. And it's what I said to the people yesterday. Those 160 people in the room, they're the ones that get the credit for that, because they're the people touching every day the employees at WEX. George?
Morning.
Hi.
It's oftentimes said that being a CEO is as much a journey as it is a position. And I was wondering how you work at growing yourself personally and professionally in a world around you that keeps changing.
Yeah, it really is a journey. I was reading a study a few months ago that was talking about on-the-job learning as CEOs, which is probably not something people talk a lot about, but it's real. I mean, there's certain things that you learn, and I'll try to say that to our employees. We are on a journey together, and not every decision I make is going to be a great decision. And what I want to do is make sure that most of them are, and that we're moving the company forward. And on a personal level, I think that this idea of challenge yourself is really important, and so learning is something that's important to me. Our board, part of how I pick our board, are people that are also diverse in their thoughts, and I learn a little bit from each of them, so that's a piece for me of development. And so as an example, one of the people on our board is a person who started up a bunch of companies, and at this point in his career, he's more interested in doing other things. So he's teaching entrepreneurialism at Harvard Business School. And when I first took over, he used to send me articles. His research point is around why companies fail. And so for the first month I was CEO, I would get article after article of why companies fail, which I was like, that's not very inspiring, Shakar. But I learned a lot from that, and a lot of that is about not getting too comfortable, and making sure that if you're making changes, you make changes quickly. And for me, one of the important points are these feedback loops. So when I took over, so I get evaluated by our board and more formally by our compensation committee. And so I had said to the chair of the compensation committee, the first time through, I got my evaluation, and I'm like, oh, that was great, but I would like to actually get more feedback. And so the second year they had a panel, so the board, they all sat there and they gave me feedback that way. And then last year it was kind of much more of a dialogue but I had them go out, talk, extensively about what they think. And so for me, some of how I'm learning is, connection to them, the feedback I'm getting from every channel I can get, and then what you're doing outside. I think it's important to get out and learn what's happening in the world and spend time. For us, a lot that's technology based, is understanding blockchain, which is incredibly ambiguous, but making sure that we understand how that's relevant to our business or whatever the most recent thing that's happening in the world, that you start to get a perspective on that.
Great question. I forgot to ask you this question. I ask everyone. What keeps you up at night?
Other than my 5-month-old twins.
Right.
I think that it's always the people part that keep me up at night. I mean, the business issues they're issues, but they're in many ways simpler to tackle. But the people part of it, part of my job is to make decisions that are the right decisions for the company, and that's not always the right decision for the person I'm sitting across. And so those things keep me up at night. And I think a lot about the responsibility I have for the 2,700 employees, their families.
Yeah.
And at the same time, my responsibility I have to our shareholders and our customers, and they all want different things.
Right.
And
right.
so, but it's typically a human thing that's keeping me up at night.
Yeah, that's a lot of stakeholders, right? The board, your shareholders, your employees. That's
Yeah, and
a lot
our
of group.
employees care about, they want a good place to work. They care about their compensation, their benefits. Our shareholders want more money, and they want it sustainable. They don't want it now. They want it over time. And our customers want more product for less cost. And so those aren't all the same type of
Right,
interest. And
right.
so, my job is to make that work, in
Yeah.
the middle of all of that.
Yeah. That's a tough gig, for sure. So I'd like to thank our guest, Melissa Smith. I also. Oh, there's some good stuff in there. I'd like to give you this gift from Live and Work in Maine as our guest,
Why, thank
filled
you.
with all sorts of Maine goodies that
Went
they.
by Flofo.
Yeah, that's right, from Flowfold.
Yeah,
Yeah.
neat. Thank
Another
you.
local
Yeah.
company. And give Melissa a round of applause, and thank you again for
Yeah.
spending your time with us today.